and Jamea Richmond-Edwards, Another World Yet the Same. My name is Alexander Jarman. I'm the Assistant Curator for Exhibitions and Academic Outreach at the museum. And we are going to be joined in this conversation by 5 other exhibiting artists about halfway through. But we're going to start out with a conversation about Jamea's exhibition at the museum. And I'm going to start out with a few thank yous. And this is going to be a lively conversation, but I am going to start by reading because you don't want to forget a thank you. So I want to give special thanks to Wendy Wellen, to the administration of Hamilton College for supporting our work at the Wellen Museum. I want to thank the entire staff, all of my colleagues. A lot of times it's the curator that gets to stand up or sit down in front of everybody and talk about the work we're doing, but it's such a team effort. And so thank you to everyone. Thank you to the safety team. Thank you to our incredible installation team that made Jamea and I's dream into a reality. Thank you to our docents who are going to help us spread the gospel of Jamea over the coming academic year. Thank you to all my colleagues who have shepherded this exhibition process through for the last 3 years. And Tracy Adler, our director, thank you so much for your vision, for your guidance, and your amazing support for this show. You've been Jamea's biggest fan, and we couldn't have done this without you. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our exhibiting artists. We're going to talk about that exhibition, like I said, in just a bit. And then a huge thank you to Jamea. And again, I want to make sure to read this because there's a lot of important points. Jamea, you have made me a better curator. You have taught me how to believe in oneself. You have taught me how to navigate parenthood in the art world. You've taught me not to call it a comeback because LL Cool J never went anywhere in the first place. And I am incredibly grateful for not just your collaboration on this exhibition. I am incredibly grateful for your friendship. So thank you so much. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend Jamea. Jamea Richmond-Edwards, a proud Detroiter, earned her BA from Jackson State University in 2004 and her MA from Howard University in 2012. Her work has been included in exhibitions at the Brooklyn Museum, California African American Museum in Los Angeles, the Charles Wright Museum in Detroit, the Delaware Art Museum in Wilmington, the Frist Art Museum in Nashville, the Museum of Contemporary Art North Miami, the Museum of Fine Arts Houston, and the Phillips Collection, Washington, D.C., as well as the Columbus Museum of Art at the Pizzuti. She is a recipient of the Joan Mitchell Foundation Painters and Sculptors Grant, and her work is in the collections of the Rubel Museum, Studio Museum in Harlem, the U.S. Department of State's Art and Embassies Program, and of course, most importantly, the Wellen Museum of Art at Hamilton College. Are you ready to get into it?
Let's get into it.
So let's get into it. Let's start at the beginning. You're born and raised in Detroit. After you graduate high school, you moved to Jackson, Mississippi to attend Jackson State University. Then you and your, at that time, brand new husband, Jeff, moved to Milwaukee. You start your family there. But then eventually you moved to Washington, D.C. This is the place where you went to grad school at Howard. It's the place where you became an art teacher. And the place where you founded your artist collective, Delusions of Grandeur, which ran for over 10 years. And we're going to talk about DC a lot more when we bring up some of our other exhibiting artists. But suffice it to say, DC is the place where you really carved out a name for yourself, where you started to establish that career. One of the things I love when you walk into the exhibition, one of the first pieces you see, Two Sisters in the Horned Serpent, is from 2019. And so you get to encounter this work that's made by Jamea when she's in DC, but she's thinking about her time growing up in Detroit, Michigan. That's across the room from these 2 other pieces from your prom night series. Again, a body of work where you're thinking about your memories of prom in Detroit. So folks get to see, again, that work made while you're in DC thinking about Detroit. But as I said, you had really carved out a presence for yourself in the DC scene. So it is a really big decision when you and Jeff then decide we're going to move the family to Detroit, where you've been based for a little over 3 years now. Talk to us about what that has done to the work. What has moving back to your hometown of Detroit done for you personally? But what has it meant for the work and even how you go about making the work?
Yes, well, first off, thank you for that. This process has been an absolute dream, and I'm very grateful for the hospitality that everyone has expressed here at the Welling. So before I get to Detroit, I really want to talk about my time in DC, and just for context, I lived in both Virginia and Maryland, so we call it the DMV. So I didn't live in DC, but I worked in DC, attended school there. And I would say Detroit is my foundation, but being out there and practicing in the district really helped me to cultivate myself as a scholar. I always talk about, my peers who I curated into the Exodus show. When I met them, these were some of the first artists who, for the first time for me, talked about like legacy, things like ancestry, genealogy, and I didn't get that until I came there. So while Detroit is like my swag and my foundation, I just want to say that like the scholar and the sort of intellectual rigor that I have was cultivated in that space. Excuse me. So by the time we decided to move to Detroit in 21, just 2020 was obviously very chaotic and amazing at the same time. But it was at that decision where I brought it to my husband, like, it's time for us to move. It's time for the next leg of the journey. And moving back to Detroit is when it's a lot of remembering happened. And when I immediately moved back is when I connected with one of my mentors who taught me, drawing, the fundamentals of drawing and painting. And I discovered his relationship to Diego Rivera, and being in Detroit and being in the DIA, there is the Diego Rivera mural is a literal masterpiece. And I was just really inspired by that. Like, wow, I'm a part of this legacy, because we'll talk about it with Hubert Massey. He studied up under his fresco painting of his assistants. But it just helped me to understand myself more being back in Detroit. Excuse me, in terms of how I think, in terms of like the flamboyancy. I described DC because I was a visitor, I was an implant there. So I didn't get a chance to like really penetrate like the culture of the city as much as I like. So DC for me was I call it gray, just because it was a little political, very, just in terms of that sort of access that I had. And when I moved back to Detroit, I'm like, oh yeah, it's really colorful, it's really vibrant. And so I was speaking with Melanie Harvey yesterday, and she was just like, your work illuminated when you moved back to Detroit. And I think that was really appropriate. So yeah, just hope that answered it.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I know the challenge when we get together and talk.
I know.
It's like knowing when to move on to the next question. I am really grateful. Our videographer, our amazing videographer, Brett Novak, is here somewhere. Brett. And when he makes these incredible videos documenting the exhibiting artists at the museum. And as I understand it, he comes and he films the artist, for several days at a time, and then spends about 8 months editing all of that footage down into these beautiful mini biopics. And so I'm so grateful that of all the footage, he included this one sound bite in which you're talking about your friend, Sheafy McFly, who you collaborated with on one of the new video pieces in the exhibition. And it's this moment where you talk about, hey, my friend Sheafy McFly always says the biggest export from Detroit is actually not cars, it's culture. And so if we're going to talk about this cultural export from Detroit, we have to talk about music.
Absolutely.
And we get to talk about titans of 20th century jazz. We get to talk about Motown. We get to talk about hip hop, and of course we have to talk about techno. And then there's a lot of music in your personal history.
Yes.
Started French horn, I think, when you were 9.
Yeah.
Marching band all through high school. Partial scholarship to go to college because of marching bands. Obviously, we know your sons, Jeremiah and Yakalo, are musicians too.
Absolutely.
So I want to know about this relationship to music. How has being a musician helped you as a visual artist? How can we see the influence of music in your work?
So I would just say, just coming up how I did, it was not just music, it was an integration of music, style, dance, which is part of like the culture. So, growing up, I didn't look at it as anything separate. And I also want to keep in mind, like I always say, that I didn't necessarily have to go to the museum that much because Detroit was the hair capital of the world, Detroit, we just was dancers, and you don't realize that until, as I'm an adult, I'm like, oh yeah, like I was just really immersed in just this cultural hub of just like exceptional things, right? So not only, I started on clarinet actually when I was 9, then transitioned into French horn, but my mom was a dancer. It would be community events where I had the privilege of seeing my mom dance and dress up. So like that had an imprint on me. Just the hair, the nails. Girls was wearing 30-inch bust downs in the 90s. You know what I mean? Nails crazy in the 90s, and that was my understanding. Like, oh, this is the norm. So when I moved back home and I'm back integrated into the city, I'm like, oh yeah, this is who I am. And also, when I was growing up, I was primarily like listening to techno. I was part of a dance group. I was dancing competitively from age 11 up until 18, and I completely forgot about that, and so as I began like really unpacking the work, I'm like, oh yeah, it's been there the whole time in terms of, being in marching bands, seeing the processions. Detroit is the Motor City, and we will have like the strip where all the car clubs, so everyone who has a Corvette would drive in a procession, everyone who has a Cutlass would drive. And so I grew up seeing these patterns, also like we hustle, we line dance, right? And so I just see all of that just, within my work, and yeah, every facet of my life. And, I married an amazing man, shout out to my husband, Gio, who is very much musically inclined. Like I have very gifted children in music, but, he opened me up. He taught me about Dilla. I didn't know who Dilla was, y'all, until when I left Detroit, and my husband was like, you don't know who Jay Dilla is? I'm like, what? So yeah, and then from there, by the time I came to Howard University, and studied up under like Al Smith, Akili, Ron Anderson, at this point, I'm obsessed with Afro-Cobra because I saw Jeff Donaldson work when I was 19 at Jackson State University in the African American art book. What they emphasized was like the importance of jazz and improvisation. And so while I was there, I had to get that piece from DC, in terms of how to utilize the jazz and the improvisation to guide the work.
Amazing. One of many. One of the reasons that I'm so grateful to be working with you is that you were an art teacher for 13 years. And so you very quickly understood what the Welland Museum of Art was trying to do with its exhibition program, the way we try and use artworks as didactic tools for our students, for our audiences. And so it's been great, all these visits that you've had to campus, and you've been able to have meetings with our professors. And I've noticed that at a certain point, the conversation just kind of naturally gravitates towards the topic of teaching itself.
Yes.
And we've been having these wonderful conversations just about the changing nature of the student body, and in one specific aspect, we were talking about attention spans, and that the way we are teaching is changing a lot because of our attention spans. We live in a digital world. We're inundated with a large quantity of very short content that's all competing for our attention.
Yeah.
And so I think about that in particular because it strikes me that with your new body of work, you are very consciously moving in the opposite direction. You are thinking of these grand texts like the Odyssey, and you're thinking, how can I reinterpret a classic like that, but not in a single work of art, unfolding across many canvases. You're trying to slow down and stretch out the story, the content, ask people to engage with multiple sets of imagery to understand one singular narrative. And so I just wanted you to talk to us about your interest in being a storyteller through art, how that sort of evolved from maybe, the singular portraits you used to make to now these figures being in a space, in a narrative. Your approach to storytelling in these new works.
Okay, so you touched on in terms of those things, in terms of how I present work, from like what happens when it gets to the public, right? And I first want to just really emphasize that around 2020 is when I realized my spiritual practice and my fine art practice was one of the same. So when I had that aha moment, that really shifted my whole practice, because for me as the creator, it shifted from, I'm creating a body of work for this museum show versus the work being evidence of this sort of ritual, this rites of passage, this journey that I'm embarking on over the, really we've been in conversation the past 3 years. And, when you all see the work, you see the color, you see everything, but it was multiple deaths, very sick illnesses, everything that goes on. And when I'm working to that scale, in order for me, I'm 5'3.5", in order to lift those canvases, it has, it requires a lot mentally, let alone from an economic standpoint, where the art world is, I'm good now, I feel like it, but the art world has been in shambles. We are just in a lot of economic uncertainty, and so oftentimes that's, artists have to sacrifice. So me even fighting through that, and so so it's not just slowing down, it required me to go within. The work is very meticulous. Every aspect of it is obviously very intentional, but what I started saying was like, my works are literal prayers. You know what I mean? So by the time it gets to you all, it's really just like the evidence of this arduous sort of like process. Not eating, fast, like I'm literally fasting. I have spirits to accompany the process. I'm eating like flaming hot Cheetos, like that's firing me up, messing my stomach up, but it's part of the process, right? And so I realized like slow it down, and one of the words, by the time the work got picked up, and I shared this with Melanie Harvey a couple of days ago, and I was like, oh damn, this work is a codex.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so what that means, the sort of responsibility that means for me to even articulate something like that, right? That I'm still working through, but even if I don't have the words to fully articulate it out, the work is so advanced, with each body work that I embark on, I have to rise to the understanding of this symbolism, because for one, I'm working intuitively, so I'm downloading ideas. So you have to ask yourself, where do ideas come from, right? Like, where is that? So it's that's one side of me that I don't get to talk about a lot, but it's very ceremonious, this process.
Yes, I'm struck by one of our very early conversations when you were a visiting artist 3 years ago, and you were presenting about your work, one of your works that's in our collection, Devotional for the Divine Mind. And we're asked a very benign question about the title, and it got us to a point though where you were comparing a devotional, a piece of text that people often consult on a daily basis for some sort of guidance,
Yes.
spiritual or otherwise, and you starting to think about, can a painting be a devotional? Can a painting be a text meant to be decoded or read?
Yes.
And it's great to have that work in the exhibition, and then again see where even that little kernel of interest 3 years ago has evolved into.
Oh no, 100%. And to answer your question, it's always been that. I mean, when we to understand history, you have to go through the arts, right? And so, so to me, it shifted from like the fine art world is, I'll say I'm in it, but I don't know if I'm of it. Like I'm a very particular type of artist that, I'm learning to express some of those deeper ideas. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so just talking a little bit more about the construction of the exhibition of this checklist, we have the new body of work that you made for the show, and it's complemented by some of these works dating back all the way to 2019. And we talked a lot about the decisions going into which works we were going to choose, and came up with this idea of we want to pick works that show these points of inspiration, that show these research interests, and help people understand how you got to the new work. But that's sort of on the content side of things.
Yeah.
What I think is a wonderful added bonus is then you get to see this aesthetic development.
Yes.
This incredible progression from the portraits pre-2020.
Yes.
And there are so many, I guess the through line for all of it, because you get to see some earlier works that are definitely more based in collage.
Yes.
Then you see that collage paired with some explorations into more painterly presentation, exploring assemblage.
Yes.
And then it kind of gets to the point where the painting takes center stage and the collage is supporting the painting. So I love that folks get to see that exploration and how it evolved. But there's a through line across all of the works for me, and that's illustration. And so whether it's the early works that were more pen and ink, or the works now that feature these beautiful marker and ink illustrations, these incredibly detailed faces that you illustrate, then cut out and adhere to the canvas. So talk to me about your continued love of illustration, why you're drawn to that process and the techniques of illustration, and maybe an illustrator or two that has really inspired you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just stylistically, I was always an illustrator, and by the time I came to Jackson State University, I was really calling myself an illustrator. So I worked for a publication called the Jackson Free Press, which was a local newspaper, and I was an illustrator for their author Robert Little. He was looking for students who could illustrate, and I illustrated his book Grandma's Biscuits. And I illustrated that book, and during that time I was obsessively studying Norman Rockwell in undergrad. And so by time, and again, I completely forgot about that until like a few months ago, right? And Alexander pulled that out for me from conversation. But even as I'm like shifting throughout my career, and one of the things I talk about is like I began wanting to become a really great storyteller, like really being inspired by Carrie James Marshall. So even Norman Rockwell, like of course, obviously he was an exceptional draftsman, right? But what I was most inspired by was his like sense of storytelling. It was so good, right in one frame. And then Kerry James Marshall, just a brilliant storyteller. And so, I began leaning into that because what happens, once I get caught up in the art world stuff, it's like, people talk stuff about, being a figurative artist. You know what I mean? And I'm like, did I let that get to me? And I was just really began embracing that. And even by the time I came back to Detroit, just by connecting with my mentor Hubert Massey, I began looking back at the Mexican muralists, and I'm like, this is all obviously storytelling. So I'm really a part of this very great ancient legacy from even when you're looking at, that's what we do. We have to tell a story. Someone has to document the unfolding, right, of time. And so, yeah, I'm leaning into it more. So by the time we had this exhibition, I'm like, this has to be an epic, and it has to literally be illustrated, and I leaned into that. And so, and I wanted it to be where this could literally become a book when I decide to, like, it could be a children's book, but not even a children's, it's just a book, right? Yeah, so it's there.
Well, and so my last question before we invite all of our other special guests up is about who those illustrations are of. So again, thinking about the earlier works where there's often one or a couple of figures, they're not always necessarily even in a defined space.
Sure.
All the way up to the work where we have these incredible scenes filled with all these different people, and of course almost everybody is a family member in real life or a very close friend of yours. The family has become the models and the muses for these fictional characters in the work. It also strikes me that thinking about that even conceptually as a form or one of the ways that artists support each other. And so you ask your fellow artists to pose for some of your works, and I know you have posed for some of your friends' works. We got to go to the DIA and see Mario Moore's painting, The Council, in which you're a prominent figure around this table of other fellow artists. So talk to me about this idea of bringing your family with you. If you get to be in the museum, you want to bring your whole crew with you.
Bring the gang, the whole crew is here. Yeah, because as we're talking, as I'm thinking more from a very illustrative, I'm documenting this storyline. I need models. So it's also, one, it's convenience, right? And I also, so I have to talk about like the superficial stuff, right? Like, okay, it is convenience. And also, like, I come up with these crazy ideas or these stories that I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with it not being family, like, y'all have to deal with it because I'm y'all, I'm your daughter and your wife. So that's one. And then, oftentimes when I'm creating these works, I am interested in archetypes. And when we think in terms of the archetype of the iceberg, this young man was seeing his family, it was it makes sense because the work is always metaphorical to me, right? And also, fun fact, I've rarely illustrated men. So this is the body of work where it made sense, and usually I would have like a female protagonist, and I decided it needed to be a young man, and I chose my son, Nicolo, who was like the perfect protagonist, just from his, he's a beautiful young man, he's so handsome, but also just what he represents, like he could fit that archetype. And so yeah, that's where I'm at. And just even coming back home and connecting with Mario and my friends, it just was an aha moment, because I've posed for like friends in the past, but it was just like, well, no, you need to do that as well. And also, this work is created to outlive me, right? And like, yeah, I want to be immortalized, and I want my family, like, people should know, like, this is what the community looks like. This is who live here, right? And these are my kinfolks. So yeah, I started doing that.
Well, that is a perfect segue into the next part of our program because a very organic, natural part of working on this exhibition with you was learning about this community of artists who have nourished your dream of becoming a professional artist, who have supported you. So at a certain point, I said, hey, Jamea, would you be interested, alongside your solo exhibition, would you be interested in curating a show of these other artists who you so respect and have mentored you, have supported you in so many different ways and made you the artist that you are? And so I would like to ask up on stage Hubert Massey, Felandus Thames, Squirewell, Wesley Clark, and Shaunté Gates, who are exhibiting in the Exodus show. So we're gonna do a little chronological order here, and start with Hubert, who first met Jamea when she was 15 and began attending a Young and Gifted art program that you taught out of Wayne State University. And so I'm hoping, Hubert, that you can first just talk to us about that program and your approach to teaching these young people in Detroit.
Yes, so I started the Young Gifted Talent program was around in the early 90s. That's a long time. But so the program was set around to teach the students painting, drawing, and so I was teaching them painting. And one of my processes was to teach students not only just painting, but just create an atmosphere, because I love music. So I play jazz sometime. And just like Jamea was mentioning about improv, because for African Americans doing art, it's like jazz. It is improv and all. So I was teaching them the visual way of being able to look at models. And what was unusual at this time in the 90s, we had live nude models. And I had high schoolers, unbelievable, around that time. But I thought it was a great experience for them. Also, in the process of teaching them how to look at the model, but I also gave demonstrations. So I gave live demonstrations because I painted maybe for the first 20 or 30 minutes so they can see the process of Ella Prima, because I paint a lot in Ella Prima, and that's basically probably from my past of being a sign painter at the time. And so in the room, we probably had about 15 or 20 students that we have. It was every Saturday. They showed up, and they showed up even before the class would start. I already had the students already there because they was, ready to learn and all. But it was pretty exciting. The atmosphere was just unbelievable. Everybody really got into looking at the models, studying the models, and actually painting. So not only I taught them painting, but I taught them how to stretch canvases, how to clean their brushes and all. This was a process that I learned when I was an apprentice, when I was with the sign company, because I had to be an apprentice up under a journeyman, a sign painter. So those things are very important. It sort of takes things back in time because like during the Renaissance period or the 17th century Baroque period, artists worked up under master artists. And so some of the things that you might not want to do, but you did anyway, but you learned. So if you learn how to clean your brushes, and I was telling people, I said, I got brushes that are 40 years old, and I got tons of brushes. None of my brushes are thrown away. They're always ready for me. And just the setup, being able to create the setup so that you can produce the artwork that you need to produce. It's when you learn like that, then it makes the work go a lot easier for you, and you're able to be a little more precise. So it was just a wonderful, a great atmosphere for a lot of the students.
And so we're going to put it back on Jamea because I want to give you space, Jamea, to talk about some of these things that you've mentioned to me. Oh, I can trace that part of my practice or that perspective on it right back to my teacher, Hubert Massey. And so if you want to share some of these foundational things that you learned from Hubert.
Yeah, so I was there. I started when I was 15, but I was there for my sophomore, junior, and senior. So you taught me drawing. We had a drawing class with you. And so one of the things with just you demonstrating. But I will also say when I moved back to Detroit and I connected with Hubert, I was in his studio like, can we work this out?
Right.
So it's still there, you know, just in terms of I think coming back home and seeing those frescoes from Hubert and Diego, I'm like, I really want to get into like perspective. And he has this way of literally bending space using the Fibonacci.
Yeah,
right?
or,
Yeah,
and so like golden ratio.
The golden ratio, right, exactly. So I'm like, and I was, as a kid, I was scooped out of math. So when he's kind of talking about numbers, I'm kind of shutting down. And he's like, actually, girl, this is the way you simplify it. And I'm like, oh, so this is like going on now. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm gonna what you were saying about, so I always tell the students like, so what if you didn't have a skeleton? Where would you put your heart at? And how could you organize your organs so that you can function as a human being? So by me saying this, that you have to have a structure. And so when creating a piece of artwork, especially a large piece of artwork, you need to build a structure. You need the compositional structure, like skyscrapers have structures, right? Before you put on the outer cover and stuff. And what it does is when you build your structure, it allows you to organize your ideals and put them together so they can function the way you see. And that was the way I was trying to teach a lot of the students.
And I love that you're also recognizing that Hubert is still teaching you. That relationship is still going on. We are going to turn to Felandus real quick because, after high school in Detroit, it was time for undergrad at Jackson State for Jamea, and that is where she met Felandus. And even though you went off in different directions, Felandus off to Yale and Jamea to Howard, you still have remained very close. And I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about that relationship, but thinking about the foundation of your understanding of art and art history, coming from Jackson State, a historically black college, and the arts curriculum and the art history curriculum at an HBCU, can you talk to us a little bit about how that shaped your perspective as an artist of what you wanted to make, what you could make, that maybe would not have happened from a more traditional arts or art history curriculum?
Okay, so I have to start by saying I wasn't a traditional student. Most people go through undergrad within 5 years. And so when I made it to Jackson State, I started off in architecture. And I didn't finish, like my mom had cancer when I first started and I had to pay bills at home. And so I was in and out of school. But when I first started at Jackson State, I started off in architecture. I switched my major when I figured out my parents weren't gonna pay for my education. I was like, well, I'm gonna major in art. And so the way HBCUs are set up, it is rigid. They will not let you, or allow you rather, to take a 101 class until the fall semester. So that forced me to take art history classes. So I studied with a guy named Ronald Schnell, and he was there. He was teaching at Tougaloo, and he was teaching at Jackson State, and he was teaching Kwasi Dyson at the time over at Tougaloo. And I also, Dr. Macklin was there, who wasn't there when you were there. But Dr. Macklin had a lot of connections to DC. He had spent a lot of time in DC, and he had done a documentary on Sam Gilliam because they were close friends. And so I had to take his African American art history class. And both of these professors, Ronald Schnell and Dr. Macklin, knew artists personally. And so we had this video that we were checking out with Sam Gilliam in his studio, and they're having candid conversation. But Ronald Schnell came to Jackson State as a result of the Holocaust. And he came to, Tougaloo. And he chose Tougaloo specifically because he wanted to build out their art collection. And so he was going back and forth in the 50s, picking up this artwork from all of these different schools. Fast forward, not different schools, but different collectors that he knew in Germany. And he was a Jewish man, obviously. And he taught from the perspective of knowing the artist personally. And he would tell us little stories and what have you about his personal experiences. So then one day we had a flood in Tougaloo's basement, and we had to go and help clean out the materials and help. And so there were these Picasso prints and Moreau prints, all damaged, right? And Kwasi Dyson and I were, stayed back and we helped for about a week. They canceled class for a week so we can help them out. Fast forward, I left Jackson State on one of my many moments outside of Jackson State. And I moved to Chicago and decided to move back. And that's when I met Jamea. And at the time, I think we had, I can't remember if we had Leland Swanson together. She was on sabbatical, and that was the reason for Ronald Schnell. That's why I brought Ronald Schnell in. She had a very different teaching style. She was more of a archaeologist, and she would give context for buildings and things like that. She was more about the historical framing of things and made sure we were understanding material culture from those places in context with the philosophy and all the social, political things that were going on. And then, so while I was taking her class, I met Jamea. We weren't in the same class together though. I think we were just, I still remember to this day when I first met Jamea, someone had been talking about Jamea. It's like, oh, there's this bad artist from Detroit. And I was like, what? And then, Jamea comes in, she had her Detroit style about her, low haircut. And she came in with a lot of confidence. And I just remember, being impressed by her, I think I asked you a bunch of different questions, and we related because my oldest brother was in Jackson State's band, and we talked about that and that sort of thing. And I spent my summers in Detroit. I think Mario and I have talked about that over the years, and that's when I became aware of Dilla. Thank you for introducing her to Dilla. And also in 2000, I think I met 2000. You were reading poetry at 7, and I was one of the co-founders at 7. So it's like we had this kind of organic thing happening where it was art historians and poets and that sort of thing. And we were more or less each one teach one. So in that environment and introducing each other to different poets and visual artists. Fast forward, I get to Yale, and I think that's when Jamea and I start to really chat a whole lot. And at the time, I was taking conceptual figuration with Kurt Kapoor. I think you took that class, right? And I took conceptual painting with Sarah Lewis, and I studied composition with Peter Haley, and also color. And a lot of those things that I was learning then Jamea and I began to have conversations about them. And I started to really encourage her to go more or less, I think she was more flat then, and thinking about things, and that way I started to encourage her to go more three-dimensional with her paintings. Yeah. And I hope that answered all of the questions.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing portrait of that place and time, and I would just reiterate, you know, that there's been moments where Jamea has been thinking about how to continue a piece, finish up a piece, progress a piece she's working on, or whatever. And you know, she'll talk to me and she'll be like, "Oh yeah, like it turns out like this was the solution or whatever." And I was like, "That's amazing, you figured it out," you know. And she'll always just like, "No, I just got done talking to Felandus," you know, something like that. So I love, you know, that her community is like in the work in so many various ways.
But all I do is I receive these scrolls from Gary James Marshall, who pulls them from the heavens and he passes them on. And I pass it to her.
It's a good system.
And then we just pass it.
One of the things I'm also incredibly grateful for in working on this project with you is getting to meet the DC crew. And it has been such a pleasure to get to know you, Wes and Stan and Shaunté. And so I have sort of one big question, and would like you all, in whatever order, to weigh in on it. And that is that your history being an artist collective together, you all went to various grad programs, but after school, you enter this DC art scene. And the three of you, along with Jamea and two other artists, Larry Cook and Amber Robles Gordon, form what I still think is one of the best named collectives I've ever heard of, Delusions of Grandeur. Also interesting that I've heard like 6 different versions of how you arrived at that name, and all of you have a slightly different recollection of that. But please just tell us a little bit more. What was that DC art scene at that time that you all were entering into, and why this decision to come together, originally Tay, Amber, and Jamea, but eventually you all joined this collective. How were you operating? What was sort of the point of you guys all working together? In what ways did you support each other, again, in that scene at that time?
Okay, correction. The 4 was Amber, Jamea, myself, and Shaunté. All right.
We're recording this, so this
Okay.
will live on.
Cool.
Correct.
All right. Well, one thing that we all had in common was that we were in search of something great. And we had greats all around us. Going back to what Jamea said, and I think this is probably true for us all, Afro-Cobra was the pinnacle. They were our archetype. And so I spent a lot of time at Howard HU, even though I didn't go there. I grew up in the neighborhood. And those artists, I'm just gonna give Jeff Donaldson, Wadsworth Durrell, oh my God, and the whole crew. What they did for us was they gave us the framework. What ended up happening was we all met each other. Well, I've known Tay, this is like my brother. We've been knowing each other before we were born. Our families knew each other, okay? So that's how far back we go. And we used to draw together all the time, all weekend long. We didn't have a lot of people who was invested in the arts the way that we were. And so naturally, I guess, when you put yourself in spaces and places where other people have that same energy, people are attracted to that. And so my first time meeting Jamea, I saw her work and I was like, oh my God, did you really make this? Like this you? I'm like, this you? I have to get your work. I have to get to know you. I have to I love your stuff. I love your energy. I love your spirit. So the collective was the 4 of us trying to pull ourselves up. And the best way you can do that is with others who's going to continue to push you. So we had critiques. We talked about each other's work, and our lives together. So it was our time to build ourselves. We have our elders, and we have those who were behind us. And here we are in the middle trying to figure out what our places are in this. And so it just makes sense for us to come together that way. So I'm gonna leave it there because I could go much longer. I'm passing you.
Our artistic journeys just naturally aligned in a way. Jamea, Wes, Stan, myself, like Stan was saying, we were making art together since we were 11. Parents knew each other. They grew up in the same block. So we ended up living in the same building when we were 11, and I guess I was one of the only people making art, and he was too. So we just naturally like, we need each other, because we were the artists. And then as you go along, you naturally find yourself attracting and being attracted to other artists or people that are like-minded, that has that same conviction, right? Wes, Jamea, I can't even remember when we exactly first met sometimes, because I feel like I've known him forever, And I don't know, we have a relationship that's beyond art. I talk to Jamea all the time, Wes, like these are my people. And so, I don't know, man, it's beautiful to see everybody together. I don't know, there's something else I was gonna say. I do remember, I don't know, it was a show jam when, we saw Jamea's work. I remember we were together, I think, and it was like, she's got it, she's bad. I don't know, man. I just want to, it's just beautiful to see us go through that and come together, form this collective. And still, today, we're still exhibiting works together, it's just, I don't know, it's like it's come full circle, it's great. And I don't know, man, it's just a beautiful thing. We have kids that are like pretty much the same age, months apart, so it's beyond art sometimes. It's really it's like a sacred relationship that I have with these 4 artists. That's pretty special.
So I remember when I'd already knew these brothers ahead of time, and it was in grad school or right after grad school, right around. Jamea and I think, had our thesis shows at the same time, and they had already done, I think, one show at Parish Gallery together, and that's when I first really saw, I think, Jamea's work. I don't know, that wasn't it, because I think it was really at BADC meeting, Black Artists at DC meeting, but when it came to joining the collective, I think it was basically right around that time, because the collective had formed, and I had my thesis show, you had yours, and at that point, coming out of school, I knew I was looking for family, or I knew I needed family. And I knew I didn't have it. And at the time, Larry Cook and I are in school together. And so, we were at GW. And so it was just, eventually it was just me and him, art-wise. I had my crew outside of the arts, which I went to Syracuse, and I'm still connected with those same guys today. But within the arts world, needing family and needing folks. And so it was just him and I. And, you all you've been gone for a minute, you've gone to Micah already, and so anyway, we were all moving about, but when I was asked to join, I was like, okay, like this could be good. And I already knew these guys, so I was like, well, yeah. And I already loved the work that they were producing, and so it was really getting to know Amber and Jamea more. And, Jamea and I, we just have conversations, and that really helped kind of solidify for me, like what it meant to really have art family around you and community and building together. And so that's really what it was, the beauty of it. And as Tay said, our sons are in drumming class together, the same drumming class that her sons went to, and which is even the reason I know about it, and so yeah, it's amazing, that connection with your art life, that fusion. As you said, it's a spiritual practice, but it really kind of feels that way, in terms of the connection we all have and how smooth we came together.
Talk to us a little bit, just even about the practical side of functioning as a collective, and how you're getting shows for each other, or providing crits, or being that support network that, starkly disappears like the minute you graduate. Right. You've got all these resources, you've got all these people around you one minute, and then it's gone. But so just talk to us a little bit about how you all functioned in terms of trying to get the work out there for each other.
Well, I definitely remember us sharing and critiquing work. Even on an individual basis. Whether it was whether we were in a group together or just calling up one another to speak, and that was hugely important because like your folks would just say anything you do is hot. Right? And you need someone to be like, that's that. No, not yet. Whatever it is. And so like that alone was everything. I'll speak to that part.
I think what it really is that we just love each other. There's a respect that we have for each other as individuals. And there's also a respect and a love for each other's talent. And so that allows us to have honest conversations with each other about what may be working with something, or we can give a little bit of a suggestion on where things could go. And that's just, it's a synergy. It is definitely a synergy that happens here. I'm sure within our group, we talk to each other once, twice, 3 times a week, somewhere along the lines of the group. And I think that's the glue. That's the thing that does it for us right now.
And I just want to know, it's not necessarily just collective, like these are my friends, you know what I mean? Because we weren't a collective for like 5 years, you know what I mean? Like that sort of disbanded of, being a formal collective, and it's just like, whatever, like this is we're friends, you know what I mean? And we just have like honest conversations where, all the time, like I'm texting my folks like, yo, and it's honest critiques and just feedback. So I just want to, like, the collective is one thing, but it's building a network of trust of people who you can holler at to unpack the art world that, it was there. But for me, and I say like this feels like the matrix, like a glitch in the matrix, because this is literally my ecosystem. It's here, Mario Moore, and you'll just walk down, I'm like, oh God, what is happening here? It's like literally imploding. And it's like we're dialing each other up, just not just through fine art, it's just like understanding adulting and that, we artists is just a means, but we're just out here trying to survive and just amplify our voice and our ideas. So I just want to add that.
And those relationships, it developed from truth, us telling the truth to one another. I can call any of these artists and I know I'm gonna get the truth. And it's hard to get that, like Wes was saying. I think like as an artist, the thing you need, like one of the major tools is trust. And so you gotta trust what you're doing. You need that. You need people that's truthful around you so you can get that out, and I can get that from any of them. And it's just natural. It's just you just connect with people that way that you can get that from. And here we are.
In just a minute, I'm gonna open it up to some questions, but one of the things that we did in the Exodus exhibition is we asked each of the artists the same 2 questions, and one of them was about giving us an example of how they've been supported by a community of artists. And the other one was just about how you know Jamea, and can you share a moment that sticks out in your mind about you collaborating with her, working with her, supporting her. So I'm just going to open up if any of the Exodus artists want to share their answers to either one of those questions, which you can also read in the exhibition. But it sounds better when we hear it from you.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any particular moment. And there's many. I talk to Jamea all the time. Jam, man, we just talk about, life, art, just with everything, So I don't know. We're always just pushing each other and sharing ideas, and we find a lot of alignment with the things that we're thinking about, so we can really have some fruitful conversations. It's just all the time. We just it's everything.
I'm not sure if this is the answer to the question, but I've been sitting here like fidgeting around because what came to mind as I think about our legacy, and there is a thread in the aesthetic of our work. All right, definitely the way in which we use color. All right, there is a thread there. When you spoke about jazz and music, there is a thread there also. He and I, we had the same painting teacher. Classical music was played all day, every day. All right, and I had a drumming teacher by the name of Brother Al. Bless his soul. He made a correlation between something that I never thought really connected, and that he said, art and music go hand in hand. He said every note is a color, and that color started off with a frequency. So frequency was turned into a note. The note corresponds to a color, and it goes on and on with every art form. So if you're thinking culinary arts, a color is a taste, is the flavor profile. All right, and so I think that what we have here is we're all little art chefs, baking and creating things. And I think that that's the thread that sort of binds us together. But one thing that I remember in particular, a moment that I really fell in love with her work and her as a person, was she was making these black on black drawings. And I was blown away. I was like, holy shit. This is amazing. And I'm not one to, I don't give a lot of compliments to other artists. Like, if I don't like your work, it's not gonna say anything, right? Okay, but if I love it, I wanna have it. I have to have it. And when I saw her work, I was like, oh man, I gotta have it. I have to. And that's what all of us, right here, I gotta get to work. And that's something that, as far as the collective, we speak on those matters too. All right, how are we gonna build this? How are we gonna build each other? So we trade work all the time. We do that, all right? And we trade ideas too, so.
I'll just say, I'll just recall these two anecdotes. I remember, I think it was a 2011 or was it 2010 that we went to Art Basel and hung out together?
Yeah.
I just remember, just floating around from thing to thing with Jamea and Amber. And I think that same year I'd come to DC, and that's when I met Stan. And I just remember, fast forwarding, has it been 2 years yet, or was it just last year you had that show in Miami?
That was 23, 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I walked in and I heard the music, I saw the dancers, I saw the mythology, I saw every conversation that we ever had and every intention that she's ever expressed to me, expressed onto the walls. And I remember feeling so proud that she had arrived in that moment. And I didn't have words for it because it was like watching someone come to Jackson State 23 years prior and knowing that they had potential, and then all of a sudden you see it 23 years later and here it goes. It's expressed directly onto the walls. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that struck me about Jamea was when I got to see her work at the Cranbrook show, and I had a piece that was up in there, and her piece was near my piece, right?
Right next to it.
Right next to it and all. And I said, wow. She told me, she said, Mr. Massey, I was one of your students in your class. Oh man, Jamea, I haven't seen her in so many years or so. And, but just knowing and seeing how she has fully developed into this fantastic artist is just amazing to me. And knowing that I've known her since she was 15 years old, unbelievable. You never know where people end up, you know what I'm saying? So, but I'm just so proud of her.
Thank you.
Okay,
Oh, sorry.
no, I was gonna say, go ahead.
So the one thing I was going to say, because you asked the question and we answered it, it's on the wall, etc. But my example is even more recent, and is that even just last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever the time frame was, Jamea and I are on the phone, for another 2 hours, which is the thing, right? Like, and that's the thing I love. It's like when we speak, if I see her calling and I know I can't speak, it's gonna be a 2-hour phone call. So like, I either can answer or I can't. It's one or the other. But she's like a reminder for me constantly. Like when we come in and we speak together, the ideas that kind of come about. The ideas or the concepts, or as Stan mentioned, like the thread line between the work, right? She's telling me about a dream of her work, and I'm responding about one of the pieces in the show, which then reminds me about something, and then and then we're just bouncing, and hence we're bouncing for 2 hours, right? And so, but it's just that reminder of of who you are sometimes, like in the connections to one another, and remembering to dig deep, right? She's gonna dig, right? So she's gonna, but just that reminder, like, that it's all like, you're on the right track sometimes, just because out the blue, like, this connection hits, this conversation hits, and it lands perfectly, etc. So anyway, that's how our interactions have always been, and what she's always done. To answer that,
Beautiful. Well, we are going to have time for just a couple of questions. We have covered a lot, but there might still be some other questions out there. So if you have a question, Emily, would you like people to walk down to the microphone? Emily's going to walk to you. Thank you, Emily, so much. All right, any questions for Jamea or Felandus, Hubert, Shaunté, Stan, Wesley?
Can you hear me?
Here's one.
Is it on?
No, can't do
I think.
that. $5.
I don't have it on me right now. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. I have a question about a word that you used, Jamea, which for me, working in African American literature, is like bait. So early on, you were describing remembering Detroit while you were in DC. And throughout the conversation, it seemed like we were talking about DC, we were talking about Detroit, and we kept saying, I remember, and I remember. And so I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit more about how memory is connected to place for you. I'm obviously thinking about Rememory by Toni Morrison, that's really thinking about place being a conduit for a type of memory. And so I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about what place does for you in terms of what it pulls up for you in terms of your spiritual practice as you're depicting journeys. You talked about journeys being an unfolding of time, which was so beautiful. And so I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about how place factors into your process.
Yeah, it's really like the archetype of the prodigal son. we fighting in the Lion King when Simba left the pride and he had to, and he wound up coming back and being crowned. And I feel like all of us are sort of in search of that. And for me, growing up in Detroit in the 90s, and it was really hardcore. It was also related to a lot of trauma. My brother was murdered in Detroit in 2014, which was very painful for me. That in my processing it, was like Detroit did that. Like that was Detroit that killed my brother. And reality is it was a knuckle dragon who did that, right? And so so I had to kind of heal over that, let alone, one of my closest friends, Ronald, was murdered there. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, we can speak of all the beauty and everything, but, at the same time, we're living through this hardcore reality that we still living through. And so, so by the time I left Detroit, it was a frustration and a lot of trauma, right? But I'm also grappling with, my desire for it and my love for it, which was rooted in my dad. By the time when I graduated from Jackson, my dad, he and I got really close. And right when we got close, he died from cancer. And I'm just like, damn. So that was part of Detroit, right? So that was this sense of like longing. And I feel like by the time I'm coming back to Detroit with my family, it's a lot of healing that I have to do. And also it's a lot of prospering. And when I came home, it was so much love. And it's the story of the prodigal son, because there's no, it's a repeat. We know that trope, right? It's no place like home. And being at this age, I'm able to understand it more. I'm able to deal with it more. And there's a sense of responsibility. Like, I was living in the DMV area for 15 years, but I didn't have sort of like what I call like birthrights there. Like, I couldn't get into the political stuff, because again, I'm just on the peripheral, but by the time I'm home, I have a certain level of responsibility, you know what I mean, that I didn't have. So home is also this sort of stewardship, right, when we're talking about. So there's a level of investment that I have to do there. And I'm not saying I couldn't do it in other places, but again, home, I feel a lot more comfortable, right? So yeah, it's no place like home.
Thank you.
For sure. We got time for one more. There's no way I could possibly choose between these two energetic, youthful question askers. So you are definitely both going to ask a question.
Mom, I'm hungry.
Zende Roth, the youngest, is reminding us that we do have a schedule. So
it's reminding me, Jamea, you're doing all this art stuff, right? Well, guess what, honey? You a mama, you got duties. Baby, we gonna feed you.
So please bring us home here with us.
Why did you move to Maryland?
Oh, okay. Why did I move to Maryland? And so that is my niece, my grandniece, Naima. So she and Zende Rob were born in Maryland, and we moved to Maryland because of the school system. When we first moved to the DMV, my husband and I, we were like, we're gonna we need to find the best school system, and that was Montgomery County. And right when we moved there, my middle son, Yakalo, had like a severe allergy situation. He was literally too cool for school. He was allergic to school. So when they would spray the school to kind of like, I guess it a fumigate, what is it called, to get the bugs and stuff out of it. He was allergic to that, so we had to homeschool, which was a blessing in disguise. So that's why we moved to Montgomery County, baby. We wanted to be in the best school system. So,
I know that there is a lot more to talk about. The perfect place to do that is the opening reception, which directly follows this conversation. So we hope that you will join us across the street at the Welland Museum for our opening reception for Exodus, and for Jamea Richmond-Edwards, Another World and Yet the Same. Please help me thank all of our artists.